China is often introduced through speed, bullet trains, glass skylines, neon cities that never seem to sleep. But that is not where this journey begins. It begins much farther back, in a China shaped by mountains, silence, ritual, and memory. A place where the landscape still carries the weight of dynasties, philosophies, and stories too old to separate from the land itself. Here, mist rolls across peaks that have watched empires rise and disappear. Ancient temples stand where people still come not only to visit, but to believe. Villages remain rooted in rhythms older than modern time. In this version of China, the line between history and myth is not fixed. It shifts with the light. This is not the China most travelers are shown first. It is quieter, deeper, more difficult to reduce to postcard images. And that is exactly what makes it unforgettable. Because beyond the cities and beyond the headlines, there is another China, one built from sacred mountains, impossible cliffs, old faiths, and landscapes that feel almost unreal. This journey is not about seeing China at its fastest. It is about meeting it at its oldest. To understand China, you have to begin with scale. Not only the scale of its population or territory, but the scale of time. This is one of the world's oldest continuous civilizations, shaped over thousands of years by rivers, plains, mountains, deserts, and an extraordinary ability to absorb change without losing its sense of self. The story starts with water. The Yellow River and the Yangtze nourished some of the earliest settled communities in East Asia, feeding farmland, sustaining villages, and helping create the foundations of Chinese civilization. Along these river basins, agriculture expanded, early states emerged, and cultural traditions began to take lasting form. The Yellow River, in particular, is often described as the cradle of Chinese civilization because so much of early Chinese history took shape along its banks. Geography has always defined the character of this country. China stretches across around 9.6 million square kilometers, making it one of the largest countries on Earth by land area. It borders 14 other nations, and contains a range of environments so vast that it can feel like several worlds inside one state. There are deserts in the northwest, subtropical forests in the south, river plains in the east, and major mountain systems in the west. This diversity has helped shape not just regional lifestyles, but different cuisines, dialects, architectural traditions, and ways of thinking. It is also one of the most populous countries in the world, home to more than 1.4 billion people, roughly 17% of humanity. But numbers alone do not explain China's cultural gravity. Its influence comes from continuity. Across more than 5 millennia, Chinese civilization has produced systems of ethics, governance, art, philosophy, and social order that have survived dynastic collapse, foreign invasion, internal upheaval, and modernization on an enormous scale. Much of that continuity has been shaped by 3 major traditions: Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Confucianism placed great emphasis on morality, family structure, education, and social responsibility. Taoism turned toward balance, natural order, and the subtle harmony between human beings and the world around them. Buddhism, arriving from India and gradually becoming deeply rooted in Chinese life, added new spiritual and philosophical dimensions that reshaped art, ritual, and sacred geography. Together, these traditions helped form more than belief systems. They shaped how people understood authority, nature, wisdom, duty, and peace. Even in a rapidly changing modern China, their influence remains visible, sometimes in temples, sometimes in family life, sometimes in the quiet logic behind everyday behavior. What makes Chinese culture so remarkable is not simply that it is ancient. Many civilizations are ancient. What makes China unusual is the way it has carried that age forward while continuously reinventing itself. Dynasties fell, capitals changed, technologies advanced, yet something essential remained intact. That continuity can be felt not only in monuments, but in gesture, in ceremony, in calligraphy, in mountain pilgrimage routes, in food, in architecture, and in the enduring presence of the past inside the present. This journey moves through that older China, not the one built for promotion, but the one still anchored in geography, memory, and sacred place. Few structures on Earth are as instantly recognizable as the Great Wall of China. But standing in front of it, the first realization is that the word wall feels far too small. What stretches across the ridgelines of northern China is not a single barrier, but a vast defensive system built, rebuilt, and extended over centuries. It is one of history's greatest statements of labor, fear, endurance, and ambition. The journey often begins just outside Beijing. As the city's towers and traffic fall away behind you, the surroundings begin to shift. Roads narrow, villages appear, fields open up, low mountains rise ahead, covered in trees and cut by winding paths. The closer you get, the quieter everything becomes, as if the landscape itself knows it is approaching something older than the nation around it. And then the wall appears, sometimes suddenly, sometimes as a distant line running along the spine of the mountains. It does not sit on the land. It grips it, following ridges, climbing slopes, dipping into saddles, then rising again toward the horizon. From afar, it looks impossible. From up close, it feels even more so. The first steps onto the stone are enough to change your sense of scale. The stairs are uneven, the inclines abrupt, the watchtowers spaced like markers of a past that still refuses to disappear. Every section carries the weight of human effort. This structure was built in brutal conditions across generations by soldiers, laborers, and prisoners working in difficult terrain and extreme weather. Many never lived to see the project finished. Many never went home. That human cost is part of the wall's reality. It is not only a monument to strategy and imperial power. It is also a monument to endurance and to the lives consumed in the making of something meant to last beyond them. Walking along it, history stops being abstract. The stone underfoot becomes evidence. And yet the Great Wall is more than an artifact of defense. It has become a symbol of China itself, not only its age, but its persistence. Across mountain after mountain, the wall still stands as proof that human beings will attempt almost anything when driven by fear, purpose, and vision on an imperial scale. If the Great Wall speaks in the language of empire, Tianmen Mountain feels like something far older and less explainable. It rises not as a monument, but as a spectacle of stone, cloud, height, and atmosphere. A place that seems to have been designed specifically to challenge the imagination. The journey begins in Zhangjiajie, where the city quickly gives way to a vertical world of cliffs and peaks. From there, travelers board one of the longest cable car routes on Earth, stretching nearly 8 kilometers from the urban edge to the mountain heights. As the cabin lifts into the air, the ground begins to fall away, and the ordinary scale of the world disappears. Buildings shrink. Roads vanish into forest. The mountains take over. The ride itself is part of the experience. The cable car glides over deep valleys, dense green slopes, and sheer rock faces that seem to rise straight out of the earth. It is less a transport route than a gradual transfer from one reality into another. Even before reaching the summit, Tianmen begins to feel unreal. But the mountain does not reveal itself all at once. After the cable car comes the climb, a long approach through high pathways, and eventually the famous staircase of 999 steps leading toward Tianmen Cave, often called the Gate of Heaven. The number is symbolic, and so is the destination. At the top waits a massive natural arch cut into the mountain, a void in the rock so dramatic that it seems architectural, even though it is entirely natural. Standing beneath it changes your sense of proportion immediately. The opening dwarfs every human figure below it. Wind moves differently here. Sound feels thinner. The mountain does not simply look beautiful. It creates the sensation that the earth has opened a doorway into the sky. That is why Tianmen has long been associated with mystery, symbolism, and transcendence. Some landscapes impress. Tianmen Mountain destabilizes. It makes the world feel larger, older, and less solidly explained than it did before you arrived. After the drama of cliffs and sky bridges, Mount Wutai offers a different kind of elevation. Its power is quieter. This is not a single peak dominating the horizon, but a sacred mountain region formed by 5 broad summits, each with a relatively flat top, creating the unusual impression of high plateaus suspended above the world. For centuries, Mount Wutai has been one of the most important Buddhist sites in China. In Buddhist tradition, it is associated with Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom. That connection has made the mountain not merely a destination, but a spiritual landscape, a place where physical ascent and inner reflection are meant to move together. Today, the region contains dozens of temples and monasteries, many with histories stretching back hundreds of years. Some are grand, with layered roofs, painted beams, and courtyards shaped by long ritual use. Others feel more secluded, resting quietly between slopes and trees as if the mountain were slowly reclaiming them. But what defines Mount Wutai is not architecture alone. It is atmosphere. The air is thinner here, cooler, calmer. Pilgrims and visitors move through the mountain with a different pace, as if the place itself discourages urgency. Bells echo differently in the distance. Incense smoke lifts through temple roofs and disappears into open sky. The sacredness of Mount Wutai does not depend on one dramatic visual moment. It builds gradually, through silence, repetition, and presence. That is what makes the mountain unforgettable. It does not overwhelm the senses the way other places do. It steadies them. In a journey across China's grand landscapes, Mount Wutai feels like a pause in which the country reveals not its scale, but its stillness. In Shanxi Province rises one of China's most legendary mountains, Huashan, one of the 5 great sacred mountains of Taoism. For more than 2,000 years, it has been a place of pilgrimage, reverence, and challenge. But unlike many sacred mountains that inspire through serenity, Huashan confronts you first with danger. Its cliffs are so steep and sharply cut that the mountain often appears less like a natural formation than a set of stone blades thrust into the sky. From a distance, it looks severe. Up close, it feels even more extreme. The journey begins at the lower slopes, where pathways pass through old pine forests, and the mountain seems almost approachable. But that impression does not last. As the route climbs higher, the trail narrows, the angles sharpen, and the stone steps begin to feel carved not into a mountain, but into the side of a vertical wall. Chains fixed into the rock offer support in sections where balance becomes as important as strength. This is one of the reasons Huashan has earned a reputation as one of the world's most dangerous mountain routes. In some areas, the drop below is immediate and immense, a gulf of open air that turns every movement into a decision. Modern visitors use safety harnesses on the most exposed sections, but the fear remains real. So does the exhilaration. What makes Huashan unforgettable is not only the danger, but the strange clarity that danger creates. Every step demands attention. Every pause sharpens the senses. And somewhere between fear and awe, the mountain begins to reveal why it has mattered spiritually for so long. Taoist sacred landscapes are often places where human beings confront nature at its most uncompromising. Huashan does exactly that. It strips away distraction and leaves only stone, height, breath, and will. After mountains of sheer cliffs and exposed ridgelines, Erhai Lake arrives like an exhale. Seen from above, it stretches across the landscape like a long band of turquoise, resting in a broad valley with the Kangshan Mountains rising to the west. The contrast is immediate. Where Huashan demanded tension, Erhai offers calm. But the lake is more than scenery. It is also deeply human, a place where landscape and daily life have long been woven together. For generations, the Bai people have lived around its shores, building villages close to the water and shaping a local culture defined by craft, ritual, architecture, and agricultural life. Their homes are distinctive: white walls, gray-tiled roofs, and decorative details that bring color and character to even the quietest village corners. Murals brighten exterior walls. Courtyards open toward family life. The built environment here feels both practical and graceful, reflecting a way of life developed in close relationship with water, land, and seasonal rhythm. That is part of what makes Erhai memorable. It is not simply a beautiful lake surrounded by mountains. It is a lived landscape, one where culture does not sit apart from nature, but grows around it. Boats move across the water. Villages remain tied to local patterns of life. The scenery is peaceful, but it is not empty. It is inhabited beauty, And after so much vertical drama elsewhere in the journey, Erhai offers another side of China's geography, one defined not by danger or awe, but by balance. Fanjingshan feels like a mountain imagined in a dream. Rising steeply through cloud and mist, it appears less like a fixed landform than a threshold between worlds. It is one of China's most sacred Buddhist mountains, and from the first glimpse, it is easy to understand why. The mountain's silhouette is dramatic enough on its own, but what makes it extraordinary is the combination of spiritual meaning and natural isolation. Ancient temples cling to its heights, while the ecosystem around them has remained remarkably preserved. Forests, cliffs, and cloud-wrapped summits create a setting that feels removed from ordinary time. Reaching the top is not effortless. The ascent is long, steep, and physically demanding, with stairways climbing through shifting weather and dramatic elevation. But that difficulty is part of the mountain's power. Like many sacred places, Fanjingshan asks something of the people who come to it. The reward is not just the view, but the experience of earning it. At the summit, the mountain opens into one of the most visually striking scenes in China. Twin temple structures set dramatically above the clouds, connected by narrow stairways and balanced against open sky. It is the kind of place that seems too improbable to be real. Yet there it is. Stone, architecture, wind, and emptiness suspended together. Fanjingshan does not simply look sacred. It feels sacred in the way some places do, when nature and belief have occupied the same ground for so long that they can no longer be separated. If Fanjingshan is defined by cloud and devotion, Siguniang Mountain opens into a colder, wider, more alpine world. Known in English as Four Girls Mountain, the range takes its name from legend. The four main peaks are said to represent four sisters. Whether approached through myth or landscape, the effect is the same. This is one of Western China's most beautiful mountain regions. The journey usually begins from Chengdu, where the route gradually trades urban density for open land and rising elevation. Pine-covered slopes appear first, then broader valleys, then the sudden presence of snow-covered peaks standing high above everything around them. Among the most famous areas is Changping Valley, where long green stretches unfold beneath the mountains and seasonal wildflowers bring color to the landscape in spring and summer. What makes Siguniang so striking is its combination of softness and severity. The valleys can feel open, quiet, and inviting. But above them rise sharp white summits that remind you how quickly the mood of mountain country can change. The scenery has a layered beauty: grassland below, forest beyond, snow and rock above. And then comes sunrise. It is one of the defining experiences of the region. As the first light reaches the peaks, the snow begins to change color: pale gold, then rose, then orange. For a few moments, the mountains seem lit from within. The transformation is subtle but unforgettable, and it reveals what Siguniang does best. It creates beauty through atmosphere, timing, and scale, rather than spectacle alone. For the final chapter of the journey, the landscape turns almost impossibly abstract. Zhangye Dangxia looks less like a mountain range than a painted surface lifted into stone. Ridges and hills spread outward in bands of red, yellow, orange, and other mineral-rich colors, layered across the earth in a way that seems more imagined than natural. But this place is entirely geological. Over immense spans of time, mineral deposits built up in layers, and tectonic forces later lifted, folded, and exposed them. What remains today is one of the most visually distinctive landforms in the world, a place where the history of the earth appears in color. Morning is the most revealing time to see it. As the first light touches the ridges, The colors sharpen and deepen. Shadows retreat. The layers begin to separate visually, and the terrain seems to change with every shift in angle. One viewpoint never matches another. Walk a little farther, and the formations become different again. New lines, new tones, new shapes. That constant transformation is part of Zhang Ye's appeal. It does not offer one perfect image. It offers variation. The sense that the land is endlessly revising itself depending on light, distance, and perspective. It is a place that draws photographers, scientists, and travelers for the same reason. It makes the earth look creative. And that is a fitting way to end this journey. Because the deeper truth about China is that it cannot be reduced to one image, one era, or one identity. It is ancient and modern, monumental and intimate, spiritual and geological, human and mythic at once. To travel through it is not simply to move across a country. It is to move across time, belief, terrain, and imagination. And by the end, the most lasting impression is not just of where you have been, but of how much more remains unseen.